Okay, so in the last tutorial we got our pseudocode in place and we're ready to start coding all of this out. So the first step to translating pseudocode into final code is to take your code outline and make sure that you have the basic functions where they need to be. And then we're going to copy this pseudocode actually over into here as comments. And then we're going to start translating that pseudocode into real functionality. So first, let's grab our functions. So this can change to final change amount. And then we need another private float current change amount. And we'll leave that as null because it's going to be set. And then we have another public float change speed. And we'll set this to 1.0 because we don't actually know yet how fast that's going to work. And we can kind of mess with that down the road. So we'll just leave it as 1.0. So we've got all the functions that we need. And then we actually we have all the arguments or the variables that we need: final change amount, current change amount, and change speed. And we have the change scale function already. All we need to do is
only 5 minutes left.
Sorry, that's my time tracker. We need to make it so that the change scale function is called inside of update. So we can just do that real quick. Change scale. And then we're going to delete it from our start function because we don't want it there. And then actually we can get rid of this test variable too. Save that. Okay. And now we're ready to start copying over pseudocode. So the easiest way to do that is to just grab this here, copy, and then paste it in. And then we're just going to comment out this stuff. Okay. And actually, we should comment this out as well because we're not ready to use that yet. So let's just make sure, well, a good kind of other general habit to follow is try to write as little code or do as few things as possible without going back to the engine and making sure that you don't have any compiler errors. So we copied over our pseudo, we updated our variables, and let's go back and make sure everything's still working. There we go. And if we hit play, okay, we got a compiler error. And you can see here that it's this first number tells you which line the error is on. So it's on line 8. So go back here. And on line 8, we made the mistake of not adding an F after the float. So we hit that and save, go back, and the compiler error clears. So that's why it's a good idea to test as frequently as possible, because we could have gotten further down the road, tried something, and have added a lot of new functionality, and we could have run into that issue, and that would have been really annoying. So just good general practice. So we're going to start at the first line of this function and start translating it into code. And after having worked with this a little bit, it should become apparent why I'm doing this the way that I am. So first we're going to do our if statement, and then open and close brackets. Since we've got if current amount and it's less than or equal to, so if current, and I'm going to use my auto populate is less than or equal to final change amount. Oops. Okay, so that covers that line. And my thing finished. So add change speed to current change amount. So we'll do current change amount, and we're going to do iterate. We're going to do an iteration here. So we'll do plus equal. So that's add change speed to the current change amount, like increment it. So current change amount plus equals change speed. Okay. Then, so that covers, and actually we can, well, we'll wait to delete that. So that covers the second line, and then we've got our end if here. Okay, so we can delete this section because that's been translated. And we're going to move this over, and we've got, so we need to clamp the current change amount. And we'll do current change amount equals mathf dot clamp, because that was a function we were using. And then the arguments of clamp, if we go back, it's the low number, the high number, or the value, the low number, and the high number. So the value is going to be current change amount. The low number, let's just set as 1 for now. And maybe later on we'll want to have a value that's, maybe we'll be able to shrink an object, but for now we'll just leave it as 1. And then the greatest, the max value is going to be final change amount. Okay. So that'll reclamp it, and then, oh, so we actually forgot a step in our pseudocode. See, I'm trying to go through this process without preparing in advance, just to give you kind of an idea of how it's developing as it's happening rather than the finished product. So we forgot this vector 3 setting stage. Luckily, it was already in our test code, but this is something that we probably would have wanted to think of in pseudocode in advance. So, but because we've already got it in our test, that's probably okay. So we're just going to go ahead and comment out these 2 lines. And then this change amount, current change amount, or change amount changed to current change amount. And then we can move this inside of our if statement so that it only gets called if it's still growing. We don't want it getting called each frame, and that's actually that's a change from our pseudocode if you look, but that became apparent as we did it, and that's just, you know, the pseudocode just lets you iterate a little bit more. Okay, so let's just look over what we've got. We're adding to the change amount if it's less. We're we're clamping it to make sure it's not greater than the final change amount, and then we're getting this vector 3 variable, and then we're setting it in transform.localscale. Okay, so if we hit save and then go back over to here, and we click on our cube, if all went according to plan, okay, we've got our final change amount and our change speed, so let's just set that to 10, and then the change speeds, let's just leave it at, say, let's try 0.05. So I feel like it's going to be really fast, but we'll see. Okay. Although this might create some weirdness, but we'll see. Okay, let's just see what that does. Okay. So it's growing, and it stopped. Perfect. So that is doing what we wanted to do. Although one thing that's kind of interesting, you can see that it starts growing kind of slowly. Bloop, 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 and then it starts going quickly because of the fact that the change speed is less than 1. So a way that we could actually fix that is, rather than using a value that's less than 1, just go back up over to our function, and this is something that you actually touched on in the version that you did, is we can divide our change speed by something. So let's do change speed divided by 100. Okay, and then we can go back to our function and change this back to 1. And let's change this to a more reasonable 5. And then hit play. What does that do? And it's growing, and it stops. Okay, so if we really wanted to dive into this more, that initial stage where it's growing slowly is kind of a weird, unexpected side effect, which happens all the time. But for the purposes of what we're doing here, it seems like it's working. It's fulfilling all of our initial requirements. And so this chunk of functionality is done. It's doing everything that we want it to do. Before we're done here, let's just go ahead and make sure the syntax is good. And so that's everything for the growing cube. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create another script that's going to interact with this scale changer script so that we can start talking about more complicated functionality involving multiple scripts interacting with each other and that sort of problem. And things should start going a lot faster now that we've been kind of introduced to the pseudocode process and what that all looks like. So I will see you next time.